Great. As everything catches on live, here you be the judge. I'm one of your co-hosts, Dr. Paul Dyer, and my lovely two co-hosts, Marilyn Pierre, attorney at law, and Judge Claudia Barbara. We come to you every Wednesday at 6 p.m. to talk about our issues, the issues, and community. And ultimately, it's about information, understanding, and action. We love to have all our guests who come on the show. You can catch us live. You can catch the rebroadcast on iHeart, iTunes, and anywhere you pick up, you just put in "You Be the Judge," and the current show will pop up, and we're here to serve you. Marilyn, how's your week been? I love how you still look so presidential.
I look presidential?
Yeah.
Well, I try. Actually, no, I don't try. I don't even know what that means. Although we do have things in our minds in terms of how people are supposed to look. I remember I saw this guy who applied to become a judge, and I was like, oh my gosh, he looked like he just came out of Central Casting. So we do have these sorts of stereotypes and prejudices. But I had a wonderful week. I went to Austin, Texas to visit one of my nieces, and she is doing excellent. She just bought a house last year that has already appreciated $100,000 in value from what she paid for it.
Well, good for her.
Yeah, Austin is just, oh my gosh, it is just growing and bursting at the seams. And it was over 100 degrees most of the days that we were there. Over 100 degrees, dry heat, but still. Oh.
Well, I've been in some weather. I've been in some temperatures where in the desert, in the Middle East, where it's averagely 124. So that is just.
And that was worse for you because you were in uniform.
Right. And then
I can just imagine.
Oh, and then when we had to get in mop gear because of the chemical attacks, it's a whole other level.
It is a whole other level because even in regular temperature, that gear is just so hot. Oh my gosh. And then you've got to breathe in that gas or else it won't let you out of the tent. It's like they're torturing you. But I want to talk about one of my favorite parts about going there. Besides seeing my family members, of course, that was excellent. But we went to the LBJ Museum, Library and Museum at the University of Texas at Austin. Oh my gosh, that was just so fabulous. And it happened that because we went on Saturday, that was his birthday. Okay. So it was free. We didn't know that, but it was free admission. There was birthday cake. There were presents in terms of buttons or cupcakes that were given to people. And the library and museum itself is just so rich in information, and everything was just so beautiful.
Because I know you
so much there.
You like Lyndon Johnson.
I love LBJ. He was my favorite president. I mean. The Voting Rights Act, the Housing Rights Act, the Civil Rights Act, Thurgood Marshall on the Supreme Court.
Well, wait a minute. Did he ever have a choice between any of them? Really?
What do you mean?
Well, let's see. He came on the back end of Kennedy.
Yeah, but I think Kennedy has really good PR, and he got credit for a lot of things that he did not do. and when you think about Kennedy as well, Kennedy started affirmative action, but it had no teeth. LBJ put teeth in affirmative action.
Well, I mean, Kennedy didn't have a chance. He got murdered. I mean, it wasn't like he was there all that long.
I don't know if Kennedy had what it took. I'm sorry, the man got murdered, but I don't think he had what it took to do what LBJ did. And the reason why I said that, I should say JFK did not have what it took to do what LBJ did. And the reason why I said that is because if you ever listen to the C-SPAN tapes that LBJ recorded, and I call him LBJ because everybody around him was LBJ. I mean, he changed his wife's name. Well, his wife's name was changed to Lyndon Baines Johnson because of LBJ, and his children's initials were all LBJ, Lucy and Linda. Yeah. But anyway, when you see the wrangling that he had to do to get certain bills passed and to get certain things done, because the man did not just put a black person on the Supreme Court. He put Mr. Civil Rights on the Supreme Court back then. So that's why when I hear people give excuses these days, politicians say, we can't do this, we can't do that. I'm like, go back and listen to those LBJ tapes and see how power is really used. See what leadership really is.
Well, hold on. He also, let's go with, so understanding power. He also got a lot of money for his people in Vietnam with Brown and Root in that corporate structure of getting a lot of those corporations in Vietnam. He was part of that too.
He would tell you that he's not perfect. I think he would be the first one to say that he's not perfect. And no one is perfect. And that's not to minimize some of the damage that has been done.
Right.
But you also have to give him credit for what he has done. He lowered the poverty rate from 22% to 13% in 5 years.
But I also think he was put behind the proverbial 8 ball because blacks were rioting in the streets.
Well, think about what Martin Luther King Jr. Think about what he said to Martin Luther King Jr., which is when MLK wanted to do certain things, he said to him, "Make me."
Right.
You understand? Sort of like force me to do it. And what I think he meant by that was get your people behind me and start pushing, and I will do the rest. Whereas some people would be like, oh, no, we've got to take it slow, take our time. We really can't make those big changes so quickly. Right. Whereas he was not like that. He really, believed in what he was doing, and he just, he just, like I said, do what he needed to do to get it done. And so that's why I love LBJ so much.
I think,
like I said, he would say he's not perfect.
One thing I do like about LBJ, I think he spoke plainly in the White House. I think that was something that many people knew, that he was going to curse you out. He was going to go to the bathroom with the door open. There was a lot of down to earth about him.
Yes.
I
think
you
knew where you stood.
You knew where you stood. Exactly. You knew where you stood. Unlike, and we'll get to, I see we have our guest here showed up, unlike today, where we have a president that I completely don't trust. I didn't trust him when we elected him. It was the lesser of two evils. I never trusted Biden. I only understood why he was going to be better than the other. But when I trust and believe, I never trusted Biden as a good person, and I never understood why he was a Obama pick. And I think to me, looking back,
we know why he was an Obama pick, because they had to balance the ticket.
And I think he was forced upon Obama, and I think he accepted it. Like
we could argue that Kamala was forced upon him. Kamala.
And I think so too. But with all the things about, we can never talk about what family members do. And how it hurts the presidency when it comes to Hunter Biden, his daughter, and all his children, no matter what the children are. But there are things that he gets kickbacks from. He just released some of the oil from our reserves to China.
Although China is supposed to be, somebody that we're not friends with. I said, no one's perfect.
But all this information, for me, it's saddened for me, because I'm a digger. I'm a gopher when it comes to political issues. So I dig. It's fine. But the average person is not going to have time to dig, to research, to read, to sift through the shenanigans of verbal bullshit so you can find the truth. But introduce our esteemed guest. I love to have our guest, so thank you, and we'll move on from there, because maybe she's got something to say anyway. But first, introduce her, and then she can have something to say, or you can have something to say, and then we'll introduce you. Pick one of the two. But welcome to You Be the Judge.
Yay, welcome. And I'm just so happy to be introducing Miss Danielle Blocker. Ms. Blocker is the president of YPP, or Young People for Progress. She is a steadfast organizer and advocate for community empowerment and human rights. Originally from Silver Spring, so she's a local gal. Yay! She's a graduate of James Huber Blake High School. She began organizing as a student activist in St. Louis, Missouri, around issues of fair wages and working conditions and police brutality. She has since worked as a union organizer, helped launch the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for more revival, as one of its inaugural chairs in Maryland, and worked with communities across Maryland and Washington, D.C. to mobilize and train organizers. Ms. Blocker founded the Poor People's Campaign, or YPP, as we said before, in 2019 because she believes young people, like all people, have the power to improve their own lives and those of their communities through collective action. And I want to say that she enjoys singing. Hopefully she'll entertain us. And she enjoys all things musical. And every day she is grateful to organize with the talented, dedicated, and fun members of YPP. Ms. Blocker, welcome to You Be the Judge. We're so excited to have you here.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here. And I'm excited to be joined by two other members of YPP. I'm actually no longer the president of the board. I'm its executive director. And I'm joined here by Owendamola Eric Williams, who is our newly elected president of YPP and has been in front of the Montgomery County District Courthouse many days last week and the week before that, talking to folks. I'm really excited that he's joining. And our current secretary, outgoing secretary, who has been leading our Police Free Schools campaign, training a lot of young people and doing a lot of other great stuff over this past year, Alex Swan, is also joining us. And so for those folks here who I'm not familiar with, I'm really excited to meet you and talk with you more this evening.
Well, remember, you're not just talking with us. It is a live broadcast, and we'll give you all that information later so you can share it and post and all that stuff. And people can ask questions on YouTube and Facebook and Instagram and blah, blah, blah. We'll get to that later. But we want to talk about, as we were talking about Marilyn and I, LBJ, and other in the political arena. Tell us what you thought about what we were saying, and incorporate that into what we are doing now, what people aren't doing now.
Sure, absolutely. And to give a little context that will color what I'm saying and where I'm coming from, I'll say a little bit more about me and the work that YPP is doing and kind of how that informs a lot of our opinions, right? So I started out a long time ago as a student activist in St. Louis and in Ferguson, but professionally have a background as a labor organizer, previously with, unions, SEIU, and also as a community organizer. When I was 24 or 25, I founded Young People for Progress in Silver Spring, Maryland, in Montgomery County, with a number of other young people, specifically one because we did not see a lot of organizations that really represented the interest and were accessible to young folks across class, across race and ethnicity, and also across different life stages or educational stages. If you're in high school, maybe there were some high school groups that you could join and represent you. Or if you're in community college at Montgomery College for 2 specific years, maybe in that specific amount of time, there might be a group, etc. But for all of us other youth who don't happen to be in a school or in a certain space, we felt like there weren't a lot of organizations specifically representing us. And we wanted to do issue campaigns, particularly on problems in the community that we thought were affecting us, develop the solutions that we wanted, and then run campaigns to win those issues from decision makers. And in May 2019, the first issue that we started working on was particularly police targeting, profiling, and oppression of young people, specifically in Montgomery County. In May 2019, with our small group of maybe 10 young folks who were on this organizing committee joining it, many of us were GED students at some local centers at the time and were former classmates with one man that was stopped and detained outside of McDonald's in White Oak while waiting for a ride to work to his landscaping job on a Thursday morning. And it made news because one of the people happened to be recording, and they happened to film one of the police officers repeatedly saying the N-word and taunting that young man. So, and they expressed that they had a lot of similar experiences.
Can I stop you for a second? What reason did the police give for approaching him? Do you know? Because if he's standing there did they give a reason or they just approached him?
They did say they smelled weed. They were not smoking. So it's very questionable why they were approached in the first place. But given a lot of our other members' experiences, it's not uncommon if, they, as young people, especially young people of color, are standing somewhere too long to be approached. So we started working on the issue of policing and have specifically talked to a lot of young people across the county in this past couple of years about their experiences interacting with police and now also with the court system and with police in schools. So to answer your question, Mr. Dyer, specifically about what I think of Lyndon B. Johnson and JFK and kind of their response to unrest.
You don't have to just go with those old folks. But it's still, there's things that are still happening today that happened then, that still hasn't changed that happened then, that still we're going through that happened then, and yet we still have the same questions, even on the show, past the show, from the show, and moving on to different campaigns. We are not getting enough involvement, but yet there's still information out there that people aren't hearing because they're not hearing it.
Yeah, and it just so happened we were talking about LBJ because I just came from his library and museum on Saturday, and I had such an excellent time. And like I said, he was my favorite president of all times, and I've given many, many reasons. So that's why we were talking about him, because I actually want to hear more about YPP and what you guys have been doing, because you guys have been doing excellent work, and I want you to talk about that. And if some other members of YPP want to chime in, we'd be very happy to hear from them as well.
Well, thank you. The LBJ comment does make me think of one thing that I think of as very related to this discussion and kind of a lot of the issues that we're working on in our communities, whether they be policing or civil rights or voting rights or any of that. And it's really Derek Bell's theory, right? Of why do we have social change, especially for minority groups?
If you're going, hold on,
I think you know where I'm going with interest convergence.
Hold on. If you're going to teach us, tell us why the theory applies. I love it.
Sure, absolutely.
Because some people don't know it, and I tell you that. And a lot of people don't always assume people know what you know. But I loved it. You're making my heart flutter.
Absolutely, right? So there is a professor, a legal professor at Harvard, a Black legal professor, Derek Bell. He taught President Obama when President Obama was at Howard Law School, etc. He has
President Obama is not a bison. You know,
did I say Howard? So
yes,
sorry,
which is
Harvard Law School.
I know because you love the bisons and
They're
I love
great.
the bisons, but I'm very
in
protective
DC,
of that designation since I am a bison. So
yes, he was not
we only allow certain people in, and not everybody could get into Harvard.
Whatever they are at Harvard, yes. But among Derek Bell's theories, legal theories, he has one particular concept called interest convergence,
yes.
Right? Which is in a lot of social movements, and he particularly looked at a lot of social movements of African Americans, right? Their rights, their privileges, their status in society would often only improve when it converged, when their interests converged with the larger kind of American
with white America
patriarch, yes, that superstructure, right? And so particularly looking at the civil rights movement, a lot of folks applying that theory have said, well, after World War II, right? And into the civil rights movement, the United States, Lyndon B. Johnson was in Vietnam, right? They were trying to contain communism across the globe, and in kind of a fight for power in all these countries with the USSR, convinced countries that the American way of democracy and capitalism is the right way. And so it's very hard to do that if there are front page articles of newspapers in Tokyo and Istanbul showing how police dogs in Birmingham are biting and chewing children, right? And so there was a huge interest convergence, right? Or a huge interest that the United States government had in the whole system to give African Americans and other minorities some rights, right? In the 60s to show to the rest of the world that, you know, we're not super oppressive, and just to not be fighting so many different issues on so many fronts.
Danielle, I tell you, you explain that immaculately, because ultimately, in the short issue is that we cannot oppress people here in the United States if the other places that we're trying to take over believe we are oppressing. And that is something similar. And now I think those days are out the window. Now, countries have always known, and I've been a soldier for a long time, in other countries, they have always known they oppress people here in the United States, specifically black people and people of dark skin. Every other country talks about it, knows about it, relays about it, but when you talk about a global view, the television view, not the people's view, because the people, it doesn't matter what they see and what they hear and what they know, because most of the time, people don't do anything. And I think that's why you started the Young People for Progress, because we got to get people to do something for it to change something. Because just because you know it means absolutely diddly squat if you don't take that information and put it into a damn action. It does not, I could care less if I ask anyone on the street, black, white, purple, or brown, saying, what do you think about the rights of people in America? Oh, it's unfair. My next question is what are you doing right now? Well, I'm done. I'm done with you because you are complicit with why it's continuous.
Right. And who can blame them? Because it's hard. And it's really depressing and really demoralizing when there's so much wrong, right? And there's so many issues, and you see either your local or state or national government or different folks act as if they don't care about you, right? It's easy to internalize that and say, okay, well, I'm just going to look out for myself. And even if I did want to do something, would it even matter? Would it even be effective? Right. And so having organizations and us coming together to build organizations, right? To give people hope and to give people an outlet that maybe if we pool our resources and energy and time and focus, we might be able to at least accomplish a few things, I think is critical in getting more people to at least take that first step of action.
I think it's so wonderful that at your young age you started an organization to do that, because a lot of older people are saying, well, we don't know enough, but you went ahead and you did it, and you continue to have success in what you're doing. You could tell us some of the initiatives you work on and what results you got from them.
Sure, absolutely. And just in terms of starting organizations, I will say a lot of very progressive organizations, revolutionary organizations, organizations across the world that make a lot of change aren't always started by experts, right? Or started by folks who have spent 30 years studying things, etc., right? And so we need people starting organizations at every level, and even at varying levels of experience as well. One lesson that I learned in when I was a student in St. Louis and watched a lot of the activism in Ferguson is when a lot of that activism was happening, it just got to a point where the community agreed, we can't take this any longer. Like, we might not have that much money, we might not have that many resources, but we have to do something. So we're all just taking to the street with whatever we have. And at that point, everybody and their cousin and their mama was founding an organization. These three people in the basement were, hands up united. These three people were hands up don't shoot. These people were this, whatever, everyone was doing it.
So Danielle, here's the thing, and I love organizations. We've been, certain people of us who are visible on this show, certain people who listen to the show, certain people who've been on the show have been in, done things, and gone through that and gotten the t-shirt. But one of the things I understand is, like, why should so many start something when we're all heading in the same direction? Is that something that troubles you, or you don't mind it so much that people want to put their name and spin on it instead of, because we're not reinventing the wheel, we just got to be a better
wheel.
Go
back and forth.
Yeah, okay.
Overall, I think where I am is I don't mind it that much, okay, right? Because whenever there's a crisis, there are always a bunch of groups that are going to pop up. Some will be opportunists, some so on and so forth. And of those, only a few will survive.
Right.
Always, right? That's just how it always happens.
And
right?
the same people show up. Every time we do something, right? The same people show up. You're like, hey, I remember you, right? Because the same people always show up. And I don't know if we get enough done by the same people showing up. But we do get things done because they show up.
Right. And that's also one of the challenges. Right. We have a lot of people starting organizations, starting initiatives, taking action when there's a crisis. But oftentimes, once the crisis has already happened, right, you can't prepare. You are in less of a good place. And so we need more folks organizing before the crisis happens, in those little times, in those times where everything seems good or things are kind of heading in a bad direction, but no one thinks it'll really get there. We need people organizing in all those different times, right? So that we can be prepared for the crisis. We can know each other. We can be organized before it happens, right? And so I think there will be some organizations, those few that survive between crisis to crisis, who will have folks who can pass along knowledge and know-how to the new folks, right? Who might be well organized enough and resourced to take action, right? But that will be a minority of organizations. And so every time we will also need some new ones to pop up. But I hear you, and I also struggle because it doesn't work if everyone starts a separate organization with 3 people, right? when, we could all come together and maybe start one organization with, 100, right? And so it's always a tension that I think will always be there. I go back and forth.
Do you think that the blacks would do better with their own political party?
That is a good question. I think the ability for communities to organize on a micro level, different groups, is extremely important. Also, African Americans in the United States are about 13% of the population.
13.5.
Right? 13.5, right? Almost 14,
yep.
Right?
46.6 million.
And so I think organizing in exclusively on the basis of race, I think for African Americans, who are 13.5% of the population, would not work if it is the only organizing that is happening. I also think that there are so many common interests, right? There's so much common self-interest among so many different groups that I think there's a lot of opportunity for folks across races or other small communities and even larger communities to form really deep, trusting, long-term relationships. Organizing. Relationships and allies.
Here's my, we cannot talk about everything on this show at one time on Wednesday. I understand that. I know Marilyn and I and Judge Claudia Barber, we try. And we get into it and time goes by. And I do want to talk more about for the young people for progress and what you guys are heading into. But when we talk about organizing, and then when things happen, whether you knew it was happening before, you know it's happening now. We knew things were happening in Flint, Michigan after Flint, Michigan erupted, right? We know things happened in New Orleans after Katrina, and it's a damn mess down there, and no one gives a damn ever in the other parts of the United States, right? They just thought it's over. Now we know Jackson, Mississippi has an issue, right? They have literally no water, but they have not had water in 4 decades. They've had bad water, and the state is blocking federal money that has been going there. The state, the governor, their legislative leaders have stopped the federal money from helping Jackson, their capital, to get clean water and fix the water issues. They've been doing this for 40 years. But unless you know someone down there, unless you heard about this from someone, unless you've been down there like some of us have, like I have, and you've seen this decrepit place, you wonder what's going on, and then you realize when this comes up that people just don't care about black people in a state that people just don't hear about. It's literally they don't mind them just dying from lead poison and poison water. Now, should we be organizing? Now that we know this, it's still not going to get fixed. And because people is going to go by that, what do you call that, media frail, right? Like once it's out of your ears
that
and eyes.
Overton window. Yeah, people are paying attention for this long.
And they're done. And so this is worse than someone getting killed in the streets. This is just as bad as someone getting their knee put on the neck of someone. You don't have to watch the video. You can look at the numbers and see that these people are dying because they have no water. And yet we are not in the streets over that. See, those things disturb me.
Well, not only that, but I'm looking and it says that Mississippi's population is 38% Black. I heard recently that it had the highest percentage of Black people in the whole country.
Correct.
So some of the people who put the governor in there are black, and they're not even concerned about, hey, by the way, maybe this is something that we need to address because we don't want people to die.
Yeah,
And I've got to make an editorial commentary just about now.
To also, have a lot of respect for the black people of Mississippi too. We know maybe there were a few, maybe there were 5 who voted for the governor, etc.
Right,
but
right.
the vast majority of them are not voting for and supporting a lot of these folks that are completely stripping their communities.
Correct.
Right?
Purposely.
With gerrymandering, right? But also with Title V of the Voting Rights Act being nullified by the Supreme Court in what was that? 2015?
Yep.
2013. Somewhere between 2013 2015, right? Folks' rights, our rights are under attack, even in places where African Americans are a substantial part of the population, right? And so those voter protections, getting good folks in office and really being strategic about it, whether it be getting good judges in office or other folks, is important. How to do that? That is a hard question that I would love to hear other folks' thoughts on. But it really is difficult. I really want to push back against the idea that people just don't care, right?
No, I actually think people care a lot. I just think people feel so helpless now. And and that's why I do a lot of the work I do. I think I want people to stop feeling helpless and be hopeful. But after you stop feeling helpless and be hopeful, you still have to do something. You do have to show up, because it's the people still not showing up that's still causing this to continue, whether it be Montgomery County or Montgomery, Alabama, whether it be Jackson, Mississippi, or Jackson, Wyoming. People are just not showing up, and it's harming us as a country. That's the thing. It's not just harming us as certain types of ethnic people. It's harming us as a country, because when this comes to a foaming froth, there's going to be blood in the streets. And people can actually sense that it's coming. And people are now starting to stop moving forward. They're starting to cower in. I do a lot of protection classes, and people are literally asking questions about how to carry the gun in the street so they can feel protected. We're having people. There was a lady here in Maryland, and I think it's Calvert County, who I heard just 5 days ago, who got pushed down and spray painted with an N on her, right? 4 white gentlemen pushed down an elderly lady, black elderly lady, and spray painted an N on her. Now, is that mental illness? No, I just think these people are just like, we can do this because nothing's ever going to happen to us. And I think those are the times we're in.
Right. And that is a really bleak picture. And those are the times we're in. So how do we get people to feel less helpless, and how do we organize? I don't know. I'm just riffing off of you all, but some first thoughts are, one, we have to be connected in the first place, right? We have to know each other. Right? We have to know, where we live, what we do, where to find folks on a weekly basis. Like, we actually have to know your name. I have to have your phone number, right? If their number is not on our phone, we don't know them. We can't call them in a crisis, etc. Right? But first, we have to know each other, right? And not just Black people, right? But also, we have to know the folks of all races and lines of difference within our communities, right? And we have to see how we have common interests. Maybe, my trash never gets picked up, and my Filipino American neighbor in the apartment next to me, their trash also never gets picked up. Maybe their kid is going to a school where this is happening, so on and so forth. So we have to see our common interests, right? I think is super huge. And then at least first start organizing around those common interests on a small scale or a smaller scale, right? It's really hard to change all of Mississippi's somewhat corrupt government practices, right, or officials. If that's the first thing that's a really high place to start. But could you start on maybe, okay, well, one of us is going to the Walmart, further across town and getting like 5-8 packs of water or like 12 packs, a lot of water in their truck, and at least bringing it to our block because not everyone has gas. And maybe a couple people will give them some extra gas money. If we can know each other and then organize around those common interests first on a smaller scale, right? That immediately helps us, like today, a lot faster than years in the future with some politicians, etc. Then we can build a competence, we can build a confidence, and then we can build towards bigger things, right? With more hope. It's one of my thoughts.
Judge Claudia Barber, I'm glad you're here, but I'm gonna, as she jumps in here real quick, there was a time when I was living in North Dakota when the oil boom happened in the western part of the state. A lot of outsiders that we called in North Dakota came to work the oil fields. Towns that went from 5,000 to now 15,000. Right? Just exploding of these people, and these people start to get home invasions, rapings of small girls, ages of 9 and up, just by these outsiders coming in to work these oil fields all through the western part of the state. It became the Wild West. It was a scene that if I could videotape it with my eyes, you wouldn't believe the show. It was absolutely insane what was going on. Men being beat up in the parking lot and wives being raped in the parking lot of Walmart. So what we had to do is exactly what you did, is families that knew each other, that have been around each other since for whatever, start to caravan in one spot, and then they literally circling the wagon so they can go to the store, not individually, but 10 at a time to protect each other. And they would all gather materials and bring it back to a central house and then divide it to the elderlies who could not go outside anymore because of this chaos. And it was so, but you're right. If you don't know each other, we said this before, if you don't know each other, you don't have community, you're going to be left vulnerable for the wolves. And the wolves are out, and they are not ethnically different than what you and I look like. They may look different than us, but there are some wolves who look just like us, right? So,
well, sometimes you're describing wolves. Wolves could be law enforcement.
yes.
Wolves could also be the legislature.
Yes.
Okay. So, I mean, let's talk about that now. One thing she just immediately mentioned, someone has a common interest, like your trash not being picked up. Well, about a year or so ago, more than a year ago, when I first moved into my community, trash pickup was twice a week. Now it's down to one. And I'm thinking, what is this, a third world country? Who does that? Who does that? Why would you drop us down to one trash pickup a week? Well, what happened? I mean, now if you're going to do some type of exchange of lower our taxes, like more than 10 or 20% to justify that, that's one thing.
Yeah. But
if you just cut services like that and keep the tax the same, somebody needs to speak up. Now, for example, there is an important piece of legislation that passed. Now, people probably think it was a small advancement, but really, from a news story that I read today, it's a huge advancement. One was Antoine's Law
Yes.
and the Maryland Public Information Act,
Mm-hmm.
and how it shielded certain police misconduct files from being disclosed to the public. So now all of a sudden, because that law changed, There is a Capital Gazette story for the first time about a police officer who retired early because of a sexual harassment investigation, or from his view, he didn't retire because of a sexual harassment. He just retired early. But the news reporter went into great detail about the internal investigation file that in some way was disclosed, and it was put all out there in the newspaper. And it was done such that the community sees what is happening on the internal investigation side of police departments. So that's huge. That's really huge. So people are starting to think, wait a minute, this stuff is going on inside of a police department where people ordinarily think that they're doing everything right.
But here's the thing, and I think, Daniel, how can people, it disturbs me when people think that things are not going on, right? We have an FBI that has been crooked since the inception of the FBI. They have always been crooked.
Since J. Edgar
Hoover. They've been
putting wiretaps in Dr. King's room.
Right. Sending up women saying he raped them. Things, all types of things. They have done things to the black community that is so unspeakable. But now, when the FBI is doing it to one of their own, now they're corrupt.
Now they are. A new word. Yeah. A new word.
And, it's very surprising. Well, I mean, not that surprising. It's surprising to a lot of folks, right? In kind of lifting the veil or peeling back some of what's going on in a lot of our official government institutions. Judge Barber mentioned some internal investigations of police officers and police officers harming folks in Montgomery County in 2019 and a lot of 2020. There were a lot of members of Young People for Progress who are students at Montgomery College and other places who anonymously interviewed many of their classmates, right? Many students. And a number had very negative, concerning interactions with police officers. Some when they were high school girls, being harassed or felt up or told to get in a police car, walk home from school, different things, when they were in high school or more recently. And they were not all Black or one type of race, and they were not all from one area of the county. Right, it was surprising to see the different zip codes and different things where folks had issues, right? But as high schoolers, as children, some of them commonly said, well, I didn't want to tell my parents because I might get in trouble, right? Because I got in trouble with the police. Others said, I didn't tell my parents because I didn't want my parents to get in trouble because they can't do anything against the police. It's my parents' words versus the police. I don't want any trouble for my family. And a lot of folks feeling like, I know what happened wasn't right, but what can I do? And if I say something, who will believe me? And so they just kept it a secret for years until one of their classmates interviewed them anonymously.
But this is where we have to give underscore really the credibility of the courageousness to a certain degree, not because they could have done this before, but if it wasn't for George Floyd's death, which really catapulted police reform legislation. And if it wasn't for the foresight of House Speaker Adrian Jones in establishing a commission to come up with the best approach to police reform legislation, See, we'd be in the same situation with the law enforcement officers' Bill of Rights and no access to police internal investigations. And you see still fewer jurisdictions with body cameras. So all of that is not everything that needs to be done, but it's something. And believe it or not, because actually, in the case of Antoine's death, I know of no police officer that's been arrested, charged, and for his death. So that's something that did not happen. But the Antoine's law and the public and the release that's huge. Releasing files is huge.
I have a question, Marilyn. As a parent, Danielle, my daughter, comes to me and says the police officer touched me. I call your office up. Where do you go from there? I mean, what is the next step you could do, or is there a step that we can do? Because she's right. Whether it be last week, today, or next week, we're still in the same situation. We still don't know what to do.
Right? That's a really good question. And it's a really difficult one. Before Antoine's law, right? And Maryland Public Information Act, MPIA reform, and some of that other stuff. Even if you did have the real courage to go into the police department to file a complaint, right, an internal affairs complaint, they legally don't have to notify you what stage didn't have to notify you what stage the complaint was, didn't have to tell you about the process, how they were if they're investigating it. It's pretty much you're just taking it. You have no idea what happens. You have no idea when it's closed, all of that, right? And so, a lot of people wouldn't want to do that for those clear reasons, right? And so one could do that. Even then, honestly, is that the first thing that I would have done if you came to me as a parent? Maybe not. Maybe I would have, just to check the box. And then when we go to the media, say, see, we did this and didn't hear back. But with a lot of folks, what has sometimes been more expedient is getting a lot of attention on it. That's
the alternative.
Knowing a lot of different reporters, calling them all.
That's the alternative.
Contacting local government officials who are elected. The police chief is not elected, right? The county executive or the mayor is, right? So they have slightly different incentives, slightly different, contacting all of them, saying what happened, ceasing their staffers, ceasing a bunch of other folks in organizations that they feel accountable to, right? And letting them know, we also contacted the media on these things. Right. Now, sometimes blowing things up really does help other folks really maybe work even harder to see what they can do to address these situations.
Well, the other point is that the news article was kind of explosive, and because it told you what the former police chief didn't do. And it showed you what this police chief did or didn't do. And it exposes other people who were interviewed, maybe not necessarily their names, but the fact that they had witnesses that interviewed, that there was this secret spot that these incidents occurred. So all of that is exposed in the article, and because it gives rather detailed information for the public to know what's going on in the police department. To a captain too.
I love information. I'm an informational junkie, but ultimately, do you guys think this is going to cause unrest or more unrest in our public streets?
I'm not sure how it's related to public unrest if we're talking strictly about exposing bad police officers.
Because once we start exposing, now some people can be conspiracy theorists and say all things are corrupt. But once you start to realize that there are corruption in all things, you start to become so what's the point of being civil? So those people start to turn to uncivilized actions in the streets. So that's civil unrest. There's more people just get Holly. Go ahead, Holly.
I have so many points. I really wanted to start with. It goes back to what Danielle was saying about recognizing good things and bad things. And this is in the larger umbrella of there's good and bad in so many people. And sometimes we see when things get to the media, only one side or the other. But when you were talking about this, I just wanted to bring to your attention something that happened this week, which was a former You Be the Judge guest worked on an alert that when there were hate crimes, they would be brought to people's attention. That if you, just as we had a guest on last week that said something, awful happened to them and it just went unremarked. They didn't take down the license plate and it looks like nothing is done. But I just want to want everyone to realize that they hadn't seen it, that Carl Snowden started this alert. And so it went to this larger part. I hope this is not too far afield from, I went to Monticello recently, and wonderful, wonderful guy, but she just got choked up and said, as wonderful as Thomas Jefferson was in his work on the Constitution, he was awful. Right. He didn't ever free his slaves. Some of them were his own children, etc. What I'm saying is people could be awful and wonderful in the same person. And that is what is so unbelievable. And we were just talking about the wonders of Lyndon Johnson and or actually of Joe Biden too. I mean, he was the one who wanted Clarence Thomas.
Holly, if you started at Thomas Jefferson, we're talking about somebody who served as president of the United States, who really was a rapist. He raped someone under consent of age.
Except for George Washington, we know that they all were. I mean, the first people all the people came from Virginia, and most of them were slaveholders.
Wait a minute, my favorite president, Quincy Adams.
No, he was the one. He wasn't from Virginia. That's what I'm saying. All the ones from Virginia, and they were the majority, right? In the beginning, am I right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm right. They were. So he was a standout, but we don't hear that much about him, right? But the same thing. It goes back to your saying about not liking Joe Biden. I mean, I ran into him one time, and we talked, and I said, he told me he was all in for the ERA. I mean, it was effusive about his support for the Equal Rights Amendment. And then I walked away and I said, wait, wasn't he in the Senate when it was a majority Democratic Senate? And why didn't it pass while he was, or why he was Obama vice president? I mean, these things are just mysteries.
And also, did he smell your hair?
I have a picture where you could see I was cringing because he was definitely in my space.
Right, because he's definitely got issues. Did you also know he took showers with his daughter when she was after the age of teenager?
I know she has problems now that many people don't know about.
Yeah. I mean, this is our president that had been suppressed when he was running, but yet, it's nothing but propaganda. No, she wrote even in her rehab book that she takes showers with her father.
Yeah, but let me come back and say he also lost a daughter. That would influence your life a lot.
I can lose a daughter, but I'm not going to take a shower with my adult daughter. I'm just not going to happen.
Well, that's my point. We all have pluses and minuses.
Well, as 7 o'clock approaches, Danielle, you want to give us information before we close down the show where people can get the information of UP4P, Young People for Progress. Where can they go to the website? How can they get a hold of you? And all the good news and how to support it, please.
Sure, absolutely. To get involved, you can go to our website, which is ypforprogress.org. That's ypforprogress.org. Or follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and all other social media at YP4Progress. Thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Danielle. Excellent.
I'm going to have you on. We're going to have you on with another group called Ujamaa, the Peoples for Progress. They want to start their own black political party here in Maryland. And I think it could start in Maryland and go from there. But I think that would be a great conversation that we can have. So does anyone have any closing questions or comments, Marilyn?
I think it was excellent. Thank you very much for joining us, Danielle. We can't wait to hear some of the more wonderful things that you and YPP and the other members have been doing.
Thank you.
Marilyn, you have Danielle's email?
Yes.
Shoot that to me so I can give her my number and all that stuff so she can have it and so we can communicate more because I got some more stuff. Where are you living now, Danielle?
I'm in Silver Spring, Maryland.
Okay, great, because I got some great stuff that will fit right into the what you guys are doing now anyway. Judge Claudia Barber, how was your week? I know you came on late, but you've been a busy young lady.
Been a busy person, and I appreciate Danielle and her work and all that she's doing. And it's wonderful that you were a guest today. Thank you for coming.
Recording